Well, look, thanks very much, Rob, for joining us today. It's much appreciated to have your kind of valuable insight into, how Aura works with your business and the value that it can bring to your business and obviously to your customers as well. So I think Aura has worked with DSOC for perhaps 2.5, 3 years now.
Maybe even more, I think we were a very early adopter of Aura. I remember getting some promo information through the post probably 5 years ago. I was ops manager then, and I remember getting some material through the post, which you opened a card and it played music, but it was all surrounding kind of the technology and how you were looking to integrate the guard response with the technology. And even back then, I remember thinking, okay, this could be something that we need into the operation that I managed.
Fantastic. So you were one of the brave early adopters of Aura. All right. Well, look, I think that sets the tone really then for perhaps where DSOC is then in regards to the way that you consider new technology. Perhaps that's a good place for us to start then really is how do you as a business kind of consider those services and evaluate the impact that it might have?
I think first and foremost, we're definitely a people-first business that always looks at technology to complement those people, and then making sure that the technology can just maximize the efficiency of what those people are doing. We put a lot of training and a lot of support into our people in that control room and into everybody in our business. So then that feeds us a lot of data, and we look at how we can use data to drive the next efficiency within it. And when a technology supplier comes and presents an opportunity that we look at that data, and if we think that's a step we'd like to go towards, then we discuss how is this going to complement you in what you do every day at DSOC.
Fantastic. Okay, so the people who have the boots on the ground are doing it day in, day out. They're the ones who are informing your decision making.
They're a very skilled workforce, and we put a lot of time and effort into training them. But then I recognise that working across multiple screens, doing all those tasks, the alarms coming in, responding with guards, it's a full investigation. I don't call it an alarm really in our control room. When we get an activation, that opens up an investigation for our guys, and if we can support them with the best tools to do that, then that's my responsibility to do that, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And then perhaps if we can rewind then, could you talk about that a little bit more then in regards to what, a non-Aura kind of experience might look like, if you can paint the picture for that perhaps?
We have a lot of very detailed SOPs for some of our sites. We do a lot of work in the self-storage industry, and they have very specific assignment instructions that go along with monitoring their sites. And these are 24-hour facilities that may or may not have staff on the sites at that time. But to go along with that, what we'd expect from a guard response is multiple layers of instruction being carried out. So if we can control that investigation, and if we can have a full flow of that using a reliable service that is efficient, then we want to do that. You don't want to be fractured. You don't want to have things that slow that efficiencies down. Historically, it's been alarm received, alarm closed, or alarm received, sent guard, alarm closed. I think customers now, particularly in that world that we live in with self-storage, they need more than that. We become an extension of their business, and by proxy, Aura become an extension of that business as well that we're looking after. So we need to be reliable throughout the whole thing. And sometimes if you're making the call and you're putting the phone down to a guard response and you're not sure what time they're going to be there, if they've dispatched, if they're ever going to get there, and what's happened on the other side of that, that makes our service fall down, because that customer is going to come to us the next day and ask how that workflow has been carried out the day before. And if you can't answer those questions and you can't evidence what happened, it doesn't look great for our business either.
That's typically then a phone-based solution, is it? So if it's not using the kind of the auto transfer feature that's integrated into the software, that is picking up the phone, is it, and relaying that message?
Yeah, it's a blind transfer, let's call it. It's a blind response. You are passing that information on and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
You're not sure where that lands, and you're not sure on what happens thereafter. What we get now is we get confirm attendance, confirm timescale, confirm outcome, digital evidence, and overall the loop is closed, which is just reassurance for everybody, particularly the customer.
And in regard to that operator role, how does that change then? So when they are supporting an activation, if they're indeed looking at CCTV or monitoring alarms or signals that are coming in, how does that empower them to then make decisions based on that kind of dynamic flow of information?
So I always speak to our operators and I talk about the scale of suspicion to belief in any activation that they get. So if you think of a simple scale of 1 to 10, so 1 being an activation received, 10 being belief that there's a crime ongoing, and you can flex up and down that scale using the tools that are available to you. So you can check your live view of the CCTV, you can check what's happened, you can use the loudspeaker, you could check the access control logs to move yourself up and down that scale to determine whether or not you think there's a crime ongoing. When you reach a point of number 7, for example, you've used all those tools that I've just said, but you need somebody on the ground. That's where I think on that scale is where we would dispatch Aura. Just before you get to that police response, you need somebody on the ground, and we're seeing a lot more of that. We're seeing a lot more number 7s, number 8s that are being required in that decision-making flow from our guys, and it's that tool for our operators to use live, dynamically on any activation that they receive.
And do you feel that a physical verification from someone on duty, how that impacts the ability to communicate with the police or to get an enhanced response from the police at that point? Have you seen the impact of that?
Visually verified crimes now are essential to get a police response unless you have a URN. But if you think there's something ongoing and you need somebody on the ground to check it, you have to have something visually verified. If you can't see it on CCTV, but you've still something's not quite right, you need somebody to go on the ground. Getting a guard on there to then visually verify there's somebody there will initiate the police response without a doubt.
Yeah. And are you under different pressure now from customers, maybe now than you were 3-4 years ago?
Again, I think probably for both our services, I think we're much more than the bolt-on security service now. We're the full workflow of that, and that customer will come to us, like I said, as an extension of their business, and they see it as their security function. So to be able to go back to them the next day and say, okay, this is how we've handled this full incident. The next morning they get an incident report from DSOC, and they get the incident report from Aura as well, closing the full loop about what activation might have gone off. They're not coming in the next day and being reactive on what's happened. They come in the next day reassured that somebody has handled it proactively.
Yeah. And is there a general, because of the idea of better technology or faster responses now, have you seen a kind of an evolution or a sense of the way that they might expect you and your capabilities to kind of support those incidents?
I think we certainly see the move away from other solutions, more technology-led solutions, more proactive solutions, rather than the traditional, let's put a guard in place. They see us as that, definitely as that service. And then when we add Aura into that, I think that reduces the risk for the customer. They know that they're getting that full suite of services when they close for the night.
And are those driven by, commercial challenges and cost reduction to a degree? Would you say those are the main kind of drivers for it, or are there other kind of drivers in there?
I think commercial efficiencies is certainly a factor, but particularly in that storage space, they rely on being secure. They rely on security is all over their branding, and it's part of their values, and they need to be assured that they're going to get that response, and they do not want their customers coming in the next day to see that they've been broken into, because the business reputation and everything falls down, and that's such an impact for them in their business. And again, I feel the responsibility of that, and we need to put things in place to make sure that that doesn't fall down for that customer. And yeah, proactive guards, sending them out efficiently, quickly, and being able to work with the guards when they get to the scene or when they're on the way to the scene, and us being in that constant two-way communication it's great for us.
If you haven't had that fast response, that transparency, that visibility of what's been happening, and the ability to provide live instructions so that you're having the attending officer do the things that you want them to do, How does that impact your time then? So what might that look like in regards to how you have to go then investigate it or provide additional information?
Again, it does go back to that efficiency thing. I think definitely I think we're almost two different operations, day and night, downstairs in our control room. So nighttime, that's when we come alive completely, and that's when we get the lion's share of our activations through the night. But during the day, we're a bit more of a control room environment, and there is a little bit of those follow-ups that occur in the morning. If all this workflow is complete and closed, those follow-throughs they're a dream, because everybody's received the reports, everybody understands what's happened overnight, and everybody's thankful for the actions that all of us have taken. I remember probably 5 years or so ago, I was talking to a customer about moving their guards. We added a little bit of CCTV in there, gave it a bit more of a proactive support side of it. The guy came to me and said, after all those guard response activations that I've seen, we never had one positive response. And then not long after that, we kind of changed the model a little bit, brought Aura in, got quicker responses, more reliable responses, and within 3 months, there was an Aura guard had detained somebody on a site.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that customer had a positive outcome from a guard response.
Yeah. It's really hard. The thing that we've always wanted to do is to link and say faster response times equals more positive outcomes. But is there a general way that you might sort of perceive the value of that faster response as well?
I think, again, we see in society now that police responses are less and less. I think whenever you call the police, your incident is triaged. And what's triage sometimes feels like is you're being pushed down a queue because there are more higher alert or higher alarming incidents happening at the time. But that doesn't feel great for the victim on the other side of the phone. So I think naturally what that does is it blends into sending guards out that are reliably getting to a scene quicker, to be those eyes and ears on the ground, because you might not think you're going to get the appropriate police response immediately. So if you are going to get some of those things that might be, bits of antisocial behaviour that might not initiate an immediate police response, what you will get is a guard that will be efficiently responding in a really good timescale. And if you know that that's something in your toolbox that you can send out straight away, the operators will do that as soon as possible.
And thinking about earlier, you mentioned that kind of void of picking up the phone compared to that dynamic ability to communicate. Are there any examples or kind of outcomes where you realize that benefit rather than, as you said earlier, just waiting for the report to come through the next day perhaps, and there's been a void of information?
Yeah. I think it's the full workflow. It's our guys investigating the incident to the best of their abilities, and it's no longer a blind finish. There may be circumstances why that's not needed, but where it needs that extra bit of detail, and this happens in a lot of dispatches where some more information might have come through on CCTV not long after you've dispatched, you can reliably check that guard is on the way, how long they're going to be until they get there. You can see on the GPRS where they are on the site, so they could be patrolling the site, and you can see it in that level of detail. When we first integrated Aura in, that was just mind-blowing to our guys from what they've been used to. And then to be able to have the kind of three-way conversation with the Aura control room and the guard to say, we've had an extra activation from that site on a self-storage unit, for example. Can you check this? That might be a suspect that's moving around the site. To be able to feed that information in live, it turns that blind alarm into something we're all managing together.
And that ability for the live images to be getting those from the responder on the ground as well, that ability to supplement the images or the feeds that you might be getting at a controller end as well, is adding to the picture of that, maybe getting a different angle or getting a close-up of some damage or impact to a facility is pretty significant as well.
And you could imagine as the customer, how that customer feels. Like I say, the next day when they'll see we've had an activation on our site, they'll see the incident report from DSOC, what our operator has handled, what he's received, his decision-making process, and then how that's been handed over to Aura. And exactly the same on the Aura side, like for like, decision-making process, attendance in a good time, what they've done when they've got there. the full process has been followed, and there's the pictures as well, the images of what they've seen when they've got there. It's it's a real closed investigation. As a operational response kind of trend, I think we're moving to a lot more unmanned, unstaffed places that rely on third parties to manage those sites, particularly the security of those sites. They don't want staff contacting through the night, so the key holder process is removed from some of that. They want to leave their staff to manage the sites during the day, and then they put their trust in ourselves and yourselves to be their people through the night. And I can see that growing and growing, and these key holders are left alone, and these sites are just managed. And if something does go off, we get somebody to the scene quick and it gets checked over. And then on our side, if that still needs overview, we will continually overview that through the night. And again, that person comes in the next day and that's where they pick it up, because the trust is that great in some of their security services that we manage those incidents, the whole thing for them through the night, and they're undisturbed. And I actually think that's a great place for it to get to, where they're that peace of mind that they're not worrying about being disturbed as key holders through the night.
And are you seeing a kind of a move away from customers being so committed to a physical key as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think physical keys are vulnerable. I think even PIN codes are vulnerable. You know, as soon as they're in the wrong hands, they're completely vulnerable. We've seen that in some of the crimes that we've seen in some of the sectors that we focus on. So people are moving away from those kind of things, and they're moving towards other areas of access control, and we integrate with those access control functions as well, and we're able to dispatch the guard. When the guard arrives, we're able to remotely open the door, let the guard in, and we're in control of that whole investigation, and then on the way out, it's closed again. Any information that makes that job more efficient can be translated on the portal.
Are there any other kind of trends that you are kind of keeping you up at night, Rob, or worrying about more broadly?
We see a lot, particularly in that self-storage kind of sector, we see a lot of MOs. I mean, particularly some of the container sites that we see a lot of backs of containers being breached using angle grinders and things now. That seems to be high on the criminal agenda at the minute. They've spotted that as a bit of a vulnerability, because traditionally CCTV is all focused inside the site rather than completely protecting the perimeters. So we're looking at ways and advising of how that can be done. But again, it's if we see now somebody that might look a little bit unsure on the perimeters of sites, we're dispatching a guard straight away, just because we want that physical person on the ground to either deter or just check that person out. But we're seeing a lot more perimeter crime going on at the minute, so that's definitely high on the agenda.
How do you kind of consciously think about differentiating yourself as an alarm receiving centre then in what is a pretty competitive market?
I think it probably goes back to that blind alarm mentality again. It's what we want is as many systems sending us information that we can then make an informed decision out the back of. So if we are connected to the CCTV, the intruder alarm, the access control, the loudspeakers, the live view of the CCTV, or all of those elements, we can make a real reliable decision about what's happening on that scene. I think our guys are professional enough, and we're a professional enough operation to be able to add a lot more value when an incident goes on by being connected to more systems and understanding what those systems are, integrating them all into one platform that we use. That's why we've always liked the soft button press for the Aura dispatch via Sentinel. It all in one window for our guys. It opens up to one investigation, and our guys have the tools and the ability to make a really good decision about what to do next.
In regards to the installers that you work with, how do you get them to think about, the benefit of using a company like Aura?
Again, I think it does fall back on the understanding how society's changed in terms of the police responses. I think that's how I would sometimes tackle that, and making a customer understand that as a security service, when we need to dispatch somebody, how important it is to get that response. and how important it is to understand who attended, when they attended, what happened, and providing digital evidence on the back of it, confirming an outcome, and therefore reducing any risk whatsoever that might happen again. And also, so when it does happen, they have everything at their disposal that they might need to confirm why.
Do you still encounter a lot of installers or others within the industry that might be underestimating the challenge that might come around an expectation of being supported by the local police force?
I think there's certainly some people will still think if you call 999 you're going to get a police response, and that's not necessarily the case. We know that. Again, don't get me wrong, I think if we see a crime ongoing and we call the police and we say we're calling from an NSI Gold Category 1 monitoring station, we've got a burglary ongoing at X location, generally we get a really, really good response, and a lot of that is how you communicate that message to a police call taker, because like I said, that call's being triaged. But the understanding is when it's probably just slightly below that threshold, where as a monitoring station you need somebody on the ground to check something that you can't quite visually confirm. That's when you probably won't get the police response you are expecting, because the question will come back to you from the call taker: what have you seen? What can you see right now? Is there a suspect? Can you describe the suspect? Where are they going to? What is happening on the ground? And if you say can't quite see, or they've gone out of view, or they're not on the screen at the minute, that call will go down the queue, because that person to the police that call taker will think, okay, that incident's no longer live. We'll come out to it in 4 to 8 hours. What you actually need is a physical presence on the ground to A, confirm visual crime ongoing, or B, just to make sure that that's property secure.
So in regards to the analysis of the service and when you might have your reviews with your customers, Rob, how do you use data to inform the service that you provide?
We're the highest accreditation you can get as a monitoring station, and with that comes a lot of accreditation-led data. A really good guard response partner is part of that, and if we all have the same amount of data or driven down data-led responses to what we do, where there's data, I think there's efficiencies, and it can be measured and it can always be improved, is what I would say. If you're in the dark with things like that, you can't really control it.
Yeah, agreed. It's incredibly challenging to improve anything if you don't have a framework around it, and data does enable you, doesn't it, to put that kind of roadmap in place. I remember a few years ago when we rolled out What 3 Words, I think that it reduced response times by about 3 minutes
Wow.
in the following months, just by that ability to confidently say, rather than the address deriving a longitude and a latitude, pinpointing the specific location that a responder was going to arrive at and get the best access to that site. You're evaluating what can we do differently next time. It's constantly thinking about that, isn't it? And how can we change or evolve an SOP, around that. And I think that's where most of our product development comes from, really. It's customer feedback.
Yeah, we do that we have management meetings every morning, and there's always the odd incident that gets talked about. I think everybody has that seed in the mind then about, okay, let's have a dig into the data and understand how we could do this a little bit better, and could we speak to our technology partners to add this efficiency in? There's so much you can do, but it all comes with the evidence. Starts with the evidence that you've got.
Rob, thanks so much. It's been brilliant to chat to you and to support us with this process.